Hey folks, welcome back. I'm David and we're here in my shop where I build E-War guitars. This is going to be episode number 7 of the series where I'm trying to learn how to use my CNC machine over there. It's a Shark HD 510. I've never used one before this and I'm learning how to use it. I'm taking you all along on the journey. Anyway, so in the last episode we made up our neck blank, and in this one we're going to work on doing this scarf joint right here. Not this one, because I'm going to cut this one apart because I did this my traditional way, but I want to do it on the CNC machine because I found some flaws in the way I used to do it. Not necessarily flaws, just things that will make it more difficult to do on a CNC machine, and I'm going to try to explain that right now. So I'm going to show you right now a few clips of me actually cutting this scarf joint and doing this right now. But the traditional way I've always done it was I will take and I will cut this angle on my bandsaw using this particular jig. And then what I'll do is I'll flip the piece over on top, the cutoff piece, I'll flip it over on top where those two angles are in alignment and they're both the bandsawed cuts. And I'll clamp the headstock piece on top of the neck part, and I will use my bench plane to plane them both together to get the angle. So these two angles are in definite alignment with each other, and so when I flip it back over to create the angle on the headstock, I have a really good fit. So that's how I've always done it, and what I found out was in doing that, what happens when you're planing those two surfaces together, you're actually changing the angle slightly. So the jig on my bandsaw is set at, it's just under 14 degrees. But by the time I'm done planing these two surfaces together and meeting them back up, it actually changes that angle slightly. And I'll show you here. So now this is a template that I made kind of as a test run for these for cutting this out on the CNC machine. And if I line these two up, now these were both done exactly the same way. And I don't know if you could see that, but there is a gap right there. In other words, can you see how I could push down on that and move that? Those two angles are not absolutely identical. And if I want to rotate my neck blank around to do the cutout operation for the headstock, that thing has to be laying perfectly flat at the right exact angle with the surface of the neck itself. That way my holes could be aligned properly. The cutout of the outside could be square. This tuner hole, the truss rod hole can be properly aligned and everything else. So I have to be able to set this headstock part perfectly flat, perfectly level on top of my CNC machine so the CNC can cut this out and everything be properly aligned. And the jig I made to do this is kind of a prototype of the jig. It's this jig right here. And what happens is I lay my neck up on this, right? And that's supposed to hold it perfectly flat while the CNC is doing the operation on the headstock. But if the angle changes each time, I would have to change this jig each time, or I would have to, let's say shim the neck up or down to get it to where it's flat. So you can see here, that's not a perfect fit. So to cut this one, I actually shimmed it here on the bottom like that to make that flat enough to where I can cut it on the CNC machine. I don't want to do that each time because there's a flaw designed in the way I was doing it if I'm going to cut it out on a CNC machine instead of cutting it out with a router and templates. So I've come to the conclusion, if I want to have a consistent break angle on my necks, I need to do everything in a very consistent fashion and probably not use the bench plane to plane those two surfaces together, because I think that's where I'm getting off a little bit. I'm not perfectly sure about that, but that's the direction I'm heading in right now. So I think what I'm going to do is I want to rebuild this little prototype of a jig I have here. Now this jig, as you can see, it would just clamp down on top of the CNC machine. I'd clamp the neck here, the headstock would lay up here, and if this is perfectly parallel with the base of the CNC machine, then that CNC router should cut everything out. It should be square and straight and in proper alignment. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to use this guy here for two different things. For the first thing I'm going to do with it, I'm going to take my two pieces of the neck after they've been cut apart. I'm going to clamp them together, and I'm going to lay them up here and use a CNC machine with the surfacing toolpath to surface off the top. So both of those are on the same angle that this jig is on. Then I'm going to glue the pieces together, and when I go back to actually cut the headstock out, I'm going to clamp it back down on top, which would be something more like this, okay? Get the Z0 and X and Y0 all lined up properly, and I should be able to hit the button and it cut out the headstock, and it should all lay in the same angle, and it should lay tight on top of the little jig I have here. And if what I'm thinking works right, every neck I build should come out exactly the same and have precisely the same headstock break angle. So anyway, we're going to get going right now, rebuilding this little jig right here, and I'm going to hope for the best. So I started out by making the core of this jig, which is that angled block. That's just, I think, 3 pieces of MDF stacked on top of each other and glued up. And then I sawed them on the bandsaw as close as I get to 14 degrees. And then I proceeded to shape it the rest of the way by hand, mostly with sandpaper, and get every facet of that thing as dead on as I could possibly get it, because after all, this is the part I'm going to use to make all the other parts for this jig. So I'd refer back to the prototype I made for lengths and heights and all that kind of stuff, so I kind of would keep going back and referring back to that as I was making the new one, so I knew what the heck I was doing. So one of the things I had to be careful of on this CNC machine, the gantry has the router carriage on that, and I only have, and that router carriage does not go up and down. The router goes up and down, but the carriage itself doesn't. So I had about 4.5 inches total of clearance on there, and so I had to keep that in mind the whole time making this thing. So what I was doing with all the rest of the parts on this, this jig was I was cutting them out with the bevel jig on my bandsaw like I've always done, but then I would glue them down with double-sided or with the glue trick on top of that core block I made, and I would use the CNC machine to finish off all the angles. That way that same machine made all the angles for this entire jig, which told me that should make them come out all exactly the same, which they did. So once I got all the basic parts of this jig assembled, I still needed to cut the height of the thing. And so I just ran it through the bandsaw to get most of the waste out of the way. And then I went ahead and clamped it down on top of the spoil board of the CNC machine, and I used the same surfacing bit to surface off that top. So it's following perfectly flat with the surface of the spoil board, which incidentally was also surfaced in the same method with that surfacing bit, which makes the spoil board perfectly trued up with the travel of that gantry. So the last piece I cut on here was this one that I'm flipping over right now, and that is a part that I put on. I'm putting that on with screws, thinking that in the future I may decide to hold down the very tail end of the headstock with a couple of screws into that part. And I didn't want to have that piece being permanent, because once I put a few screws in it, the screws are going to try to find the old holes, and I thought it would just wear out. So I made that last piece there as a removable part. Okay, so let me show you what we've got so far. So here's the jig. Okay, I think it all came out pretty nice. I've got a base plate right here, which is going to allow me to clamp it down to the spoil board. I've got this extended piece coming off of here, which is going to wind up holding up the neck. That'll give me a little clamping surface for the neck to go on. And I've got one clamp here, and I've got a hole for a second clamp here. Then when my neck's in place, I could use it to clamp down onto there. So I've made all these angles. Each of these pieces has an angle on it, and all the angles were made off of that original piece I cut, that hand piece I made. That was a 14-degree bevel or a 14-degree angle on it. And I used that to make all the pieces of this jig. So my angles all lay out really nice. I have a really very nice flat plane going up here, okay? And that is a nice flat plane here. All right, and I've got my bevel gauge, which is set at 14 degrees. And if I hold it on this side, I line up beautifully going down the slope, and the same thing over here. I have a really nice, so I feel pretty good about it. I think it's come out pretty nice. I could clamp it right down here, and I could slide it back and forth here, which is another reason I have this extension piece. I could slide it back and forth here to get my headstock in the right place as I line it up to cut out the headstock parts. And also a part of this whole jig or neck cutting system is also this fence that I've made too, which is notched to work around the spoil board. And I could use this fence and this jig in conjunction when I'm cutting out my necks and cutting out the headstocks too. So overall, I feel pretty good about the jig. It was an awful lot of work, but if you think about the time I will save each time I build a neck and the accuracy that I could potentially have using a jig like that, I think the time was well spent. But I want to find out for sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and resaw this off again. I'm going to cut this headstock part back off of this. I'm going to lose just a tiny little bit of the neck piece here, but I've got plenty of length here. And I'm hoping my stripes still line up after I do that, because that's always kind of a tricky thing when you're doing these tapered stripes with a scarf joint headstock. But so I think that's what I'm going to do. I want to give it a try. So I'm going to go ahead and saw this off again, resurface the back side of this thing, surface the two top pieces here, the two cut pieces, and glue this thing back on and see how it comes out. So I don't mind telling you, I was pretty nervous about cutting this scarf joint back apart again. Since it came out pretty nice the first time around. It just wasn't, you know, I thought about all this jig and everything after I'd already done that, and I really wanted to try it out on this neck and see how well it would work. So I went ahead and went for it anyway, hoping I wasn't gonna screw the thing up where I'd have to start all over again. So once I cut that off, that headstock back off of there, I went ahead and ran the surfacing bit across it to get that last little bit of neck that was still glued on there, and to make it all really nicely surfaced and trued up really well. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do to anchor this down on top of the main part of the neck, I can use this really sticky double-sided sticky tape. This stuff really sticks good. And I'm going to hope for the best. I'm probably going to do 3 strips across the back. It's pretty clean. So my goal in doing all this is to create necks that are more precise than I was before, more consistent than I had been in the past, and make it repeatable to where I can get it a really good system down and I can repeat it over and over again, so I always can be confident that my necks are as good as I can possibly do. So this tool path I created, I think I had it cutting 20 thousandths of an inch off of that top surface. I wasn't really sure what to do, but I went ahead and cut it, and I checked it then for straightness, which it was beautifully straight and beautifully flat. But I did notice that one corner, it didn't get quite cut all the way, so I just went ahead and set up and reran the same tool path and took another 20 thousandths off, and then it came out perfect. Okay, so that came out really, really nice. I have a really nice, flat, smooth surface across the top. I've got great seams. I don't know if you could see that, but it's just a very nice seam. Both sides. Looks really good. I've got, I wound up going back with really nice center alignment on my stripes on both sides. Of course, this one's getting covered, but you know, it's a very hard thing to do to get these stripes to reline up again. And I've got them both very close, as close as I've ever gotten it anyway. So I think that jig is going to be a good thing. I really do. I'm going to go ahead and drill in these two brass pins right here, my alignment pins. And I think when after this sets up, I'm going to go ahead and put this down on the CNC table, and I'm going to resurface this whole side and then set it up on that jig and resurface this. Although I'd say they're probably pretty close, I'm going to go ahead and do that before I start milling up the rest of the neck. So anyway, so I'm happy. I'm happy with that jig. I really am. Time to get out some glue. Well, folks, that's about it for this video. I'm glad you stopped by and checked it out. So I tell you what, I can't be happier with the way that jig worked and the way this neck is coming out now. I mean, I am just thrilled to death. After I was done gluing the headstock back on, I went ahead and surfaced the neck and I surfaced the face of the headstock, and that break angle line just came out square and crisp and straight. It was just a beautiful thing. I really think it came out cool. I've since glued the headstock plate on here, which is a multi-laminate thing I did, so you can't see that joint now, but anyway, I'm really happy with the way it came out. I think that's a cool jig. It's my new favorite jig I own. Anyway, I appreciate you all checking out my video. Hope you come back and check out next week when we're going to cut out this neck. Anyway, God bless you, and we'll see you all in the next one.